Get booty like I'm Patchy Parrot from the SpongeBob. I get offended and I might bring a gun mob. Except for samurai swords, I bring more than your average rapper's national tour. I explode like C4.
What's up, my wizards? It's Dev from SBMTG down there on the YouTube.com. We do magic stuff, you know that by now. But today, I'm bringing you a double deck tech. I've been telling you about this burn deck for the last 2 weeks that I've been working on, and I've got a good one for you, budget style. But last few days, maybe 3-4 days here, I've been working on an idea for a competitive burn deck tech with a twist. So I'm going to give you both, starting with the budget tech now. Well, we're not playing too many creatures in this deck, so I'm going to start with the spells in the 1-drops and just work our way up the mana curve from there. We're going to play 2 copies to start things off here. Let's go ahead and kick it off. A Fiery Impulse. Sure, it doesn't hit the player or anything, but we're playing a ton of instants and sorcery, so it's very easy to get the spell mastery off on this one. Early game, it can kill, small early-in dudes. That's what it's there for against things like Mono White and other aggro-y decks, and the Rights deck, for instance. And a little bit later, not too much later, though, in the scheme of things, it can kill stuff like Reflector Mage and Sylvan Advocate before it becomes huge. So, Fiery Impulse, always good. We're doing some stuff with Madness. You probably aren't surprised to learn at all. So we need Madness outlets and cards with Madness. Madness outlets that we're playing. We're going to play a whole playset of Lightning Axe and also the full 4 of Tormenting Voice here. Voice is good because in a burn deck it allows us to go a little bit deeper into the deck, maybe find some burn pieces to either finish the game off or put it in reach. All of that's good. Lightning Axe is just good because it can take out the biggest creature on the board 95% of the time. And, burn decks, just like with Fiery Impulse, sometimes burn decks need some cards that are focused on creatures so that cards that hit either players or creatures, like say Exquisite Firecraft, we can focus those more on the player because we have things like Axe and Fiery Impulse to hit their creatures with. We need some cards with Madness as well, obviously, if we're going to get the value out of these discard outlets. So we're going to play the full 4 of, again, Avacyn's Judgement and a whole play set as well of Fiery Temper here. Both fantastic cards, Fiery Temper. 3 damage is worth 3 mana. Sometimes, if you don't have the Madness outlet for it, still cast it for 3, and that sometimes is fine, And if you can't cast it with Madness, that's obviously just cake. Avacyn's Judgement, though, the one I want to talk about. This card is actually super sick, and is great, obviously, alongside either of our Madness outlets, but especially Lightning Axe. Just 1 mana allows us to kill one of their biggest guys, and in this case, we'll be able to focus a lot of the damage from Avacyn's Judgement onto the player, which is always good. But with Avacyn's Judgement, we can just take out 3 dudes sometimes on top of the guy we're killing with Lightning Axe. It can just be a board wipe some of the time. And that's good because we're not playing any main deck board wipes and we don't have access in the budget deck to the money we need to play the good board wipes in the format. So Avacyn's Judgement has been great, and it's not even that bad if you just cast it without its Madness cost, 2 mana, 2 damage, clean, that's not bad. And you can split it, which is also good. We're playing basically 4 more copies of Judgement in Twinbolt here. We're going to play a full play set of that. Obviously, it doesn't have the Madness that Judgement has, but it is instant speed, so that's good. Sometimes against tokens decks, this can take out 2 things, 2 tokens. It can sometimes kill a token and deal damage to a Nissa, for instance. That's not bad. Remember, of course, that when you deal damage to a player, you can redirect the damage to Planeswalkers. A lot of Planeswalkers in this format right now, so burn is actually pretty good. In this deck, we have 22 spells that are capable of doing damage to a player, which means that most Planeswalkers won't stick around for very long. But Twinbolt is still fairly utility. We can just do 2 to the dome, we can take out a small creature, ping them for 1, Pretty versatile card, and it shows up in some sideboards. In this budget burn deck, I think it's one of the best burn pieces we can play. I was thinking Touch of the Void, but I wanted another 2 mana piece. I think Twinbolt's pretty good. We're going to play a 4 of Exquisite Firecraft in the deck. One of the more expensive pieces in the deck, yes, but if you're playing burn, you've got to go the full 4 of here. Great with Goblin Dark Dwellers, obviously the other expensive card in the deck. $3 whole dollars, with $253 right now. Same thing with Exquisite Firecraft, $253, something like that. But always worth it in a burn deck. It is the quintessential piece in this standard. So you can either take out a Planeswalker, almost no questions asked a lot of the times, or you can just deal 4 to the dome, often uncounterable, which is important against the control decks in the field, which there are some. Here's where we get slightly weird in this 4-drop slot here. We're playing 3 copies of Structural Distortion. Now, hear me out. I've talked about Structural Distortion before. I like this card probably a little bit more than I should, but in this burn deck, it's been pretty good, and I like its applications against certain decks in the format. Some decks like to play 3 colors and be very thin on that 3rd color, and there's a 4-color Rights deck in the format right now, too. In a format where 4 colors is tough, so sometimes taking out 1 source can make a huge difference. We've also got a lot of important lands in this format, including Westvale Abbey, which this can take out. This will always find a target because it can hit lands, and it can also hit Pyromancer's Goggles if they've got one of those out. It can hit Hangerback Walkers in a dire situation if that's what you want to do. It can hit a lot of things, and again, always finds a target because of the land, and important here, we'll do 2 damage to them. So it feels like, you know, a lot of people would say like, this is kind of a wasted spell, but at least you're doing the 2 damage to them, and you're taking out one of their lands, which against the ramp decks can be very good. A card like Nissa's Renewal is very, very good against us, but something like Structural Distortion can almost feel like a time walk against some decks, and ramp decks included. You've taken away their Nissa's Pilgrimage or something like that. And it puts them a turn behind on stuff like Renewal, so it gives us a much better shot. Structural Distortion works for a lot of reasons. We're going to play a 4 of Goblin Dark Dwellers in the deck. It is that important, a key piece, super critical this guy is, in this budget deck at least. Goblin Dark Dwellers, and this is the only creature that we're playing. That's important. I've mentioned this in a video before, I believe, but I'll go ahead and say it again here real quickly. The fewer creatures you play, the more you dead removal in their hand, the more you blank removal in your opponent's hand. We're seeing a lot of decks, you know, white-black control, Esper control, or dragons right now in the format that play a ton of removal, and being able to blank removal in their hand by playing very, very few creatures is actually really, really good. We have fair game, especially against control, because Exquisite Firecraft can't be countered. If we resolve a Goblin Dark Dwellers, that can be pretty sick pretty quick. And we've got other tricks against control too. We're just sort of assaulting them constantly with damage. One thing to remember is that if you cast a Lightning Axe or a Tormenting Voice out of your graveyard with a Goblin Dark Dwellers, you don't have to pay its mana cost, but you will still have to pay its other costs. So with Lightning Axe, you'll still have to discard the card, which can actually be beneficial. Same thing with Tormenting Voice if you're trying to cast something with Madness. Aside from that, we get a 4/4 Menace Body, which can sometimes finish the game if we've been able to keep the board clean enough. So everything about Goblin Dark Dwellers is an absolute must. Finishing off the main in the budget deck here, there's 3 copies of Fall of the Titans, which I know is a 1-drop, but it's got X cost. But anyway, Fall of the Titans, just a great finisher in the deck. You know, we're playing something like 6 1-mana spells, so it's pretty easy to just get the surge off on this and do a huge one. Sometimes killing 2 creatures, or just killing a creature and doing a massive amount of damage to the face. This Fall of the Titans is obviously a great finish in the deck. This gives us 2 X spells, basically, if you count Avacyn's Judgement, which I do, because we have like 8 Madness outlets. So we have 2 X spells in the deck, and this one is just a perfect finisher alongside Avacyn's Judgement too. We get enough mana out, this can be a great way to provide a little bit of reach and finish the game. We're playing 24 lands in the deck. Here they are. 24 mountains in this budget deck. I just don't see any reason to play really anything else. I'm sure, man, I feel like I'm missing something here, but I don't know. 24 mountains, especially to keep it budget, that's fine. I guess you could play Majoring Network or something to make your X spells better. But anyway, here's the sideboard right here, and it's pretty cut and dry. And we're playing a lot of copies of a lot of things. Seismic Rupture is especially important. In a budget deck, it's our copy of Kozilek's Return or Radiant Flames. It's very good against mono-white humans or the green, with the green-black or the 4-color Rights deck. Pretty good against that as well. So just love Seismic Rupture from a budget standpoint. Same thing with Scab-Clan Berserker. Card's still fairly budget and works a lot of good things, just wonders against control. So that's awesome. Here's the power rankings for the budget deck right here. A final score of 59, not bad at all for a $30 deck. You know, approaching 60 is getting quite competitive, and in this format, the deck can do some work. We do have some problems against, like I've said, ramp if they can cast Nissa's Renewal. That's going to be problems. And also we have problems if we can't kill a Kalitas. That can get ugly quickly if we can't deal with him. But we have some tricks, but there are some bad matchups too. But we're good against control, we're good against aggro. $30 is the final cost of this deck. I've said that a couple times. I just want to drive it home. 30, 35 after sideboards, really not a bad cost to pay at all, especially if you want to kind of dip your toe in Standard right now. This is a fun deck that can win fast or play defensively. Murders Planeswalkers, so if there's a bunch of those at your FNM, try this out, and it's not bad at all. But here's a novel idea. Let's jump into the competitive deck here. This is Seasons Past Burn. I've had this idea for a little while now. I just wanted to try it out, and the results so far, at least, have been pretty hilarious. Honestly, there's a lot of interesting synergy available to us in this deck. And I'm going to go ahead and start it off here. We're going to, same thing, we're going to move through the curve, but one at a time, which is even more important with Seasons Past because we have to play a lot of stuff at the different slots. 1, 2, 3, 4. We have to make room for everything to get the most value out of Seasons Past. we're going to play this same basic Madness suite, but we're going to tweak the numbers a little bit to allow for some stuff higher up on the curve. Because in this deck, we get to play Goggles, we get to play Chandra, and Seasons Past. So we have to allow for some stuff higher up. We got to tweak some numbers. That said, we're still going to play the full 4 of Lightning Axe, but we're going to cut it to 3 copies of Tormenting Voice. I'm going to play the 4 Lightning Axe for a couple of reasons here. We need 1-drops because Fall of the Titans is in the deck. You know, it's great to maximize the value of Fall of the Titans with as many 1-drops as possible. Also with Avacyn's Judgement, if we have more Lightning Axes, we have a better chance of getting off a huge Avacyn's Judgement. After a Seasons Past, if you have either a Judgement or a Fall of the Titans in your hand, you can cast Seasons Past, get the Lightning Axe out of your graveyard, and then that sets you up to where you can cast a huge Avacyn's Judgement or a huge Fall of the Titans. So more 1-drops is good, especially Lightning Axe, because it works with both of our X spells very well. I'm still going to play the full play sets of both Judgement and Fiery Temper in the deck. And you may be saying, hey, that's 7 Madness outlets, 8 cards with Madness. That's actually not that big of a deal, even under normal circumstances. But in this deck, we have Seasons Past. So any cards that we cast that are Madness outlets, we can cast again later after we Seasons Past. And that allows us to cast more cards with Madness. Avacyn's Judgement is especially good in a deck that carries Pyromancer's Goggles. That interaction is bomb. And also, just Fiery Temper is always Fiery Temper, solid card. Going back to the 1-drops for a second here, I'm going to play the 1 copy of Magmatic Insight. Magmatic Insight is great with Pyromancer's Goggles, yes. And in this deck, if we play a Seasons Past, we're able to get back both the land, it costs 0, and the Magmatic Insight. So it sets us up to cast Magmatic Insight again. And this time we may have a Goggles in play. To finish off the 1-drops, we're going to play 3 copies of Fall of the Titans in the deck. Does count as a 1-drop for the purposes of Seasons Past. Now, this is obviously especially also good with Pyromancer's Goggles, and is even more of a finishing blow than it is in the budget deck. You know, just all of these cards get so much better with Pyromancer's Goggles in the deck, and especially Fall of the Titans. You can take out like 4 creatures really easily. You can, you know, kill 3 creatures and deal a bunch of damage to them. So there's just really a lot of flexibility in Fall of the Titans alongside Goggles. And again, with Seasons Past, it's pretty easy to set things up. You know, you got a Fall of the Titans in your hand, you cast a Seasons Past, you get a 1-drop card back, and that allows you to play the Fall of the Titans with Surge pretty easily. Big surprise, we're going to play 4 copies of Exquisite Firecraft in the deck. When you play your Seasons Past, this is pretty much always the 3-drop you're going to get back if you have it in your graveyard. Exquisite Firecraft, just crazy. I've already talked about how good this card is in the budget deck. Does not lose any value in this deck. It's just really a centerpiece card. Now in this deck, we're going to just play in the 4-drop slot 2 copies of Structural Distortion. Now, there's a couple of things you could do instead, so don't, dislike just yet. You could, if you really felt like you wanted to, but in any case, if you don't want to play Structural Distortion, you could make some room for Pian Kiran and Hangerback Walker. Hangerback Walker counts as a 0-cost card. When you play Seasons Past, you can get it back with Seasons Past if it's in your graveyard. And Pian Kiran is a good 4-drop that applies both defense and offensive pressure and allows us to deal 2 damage at a time. And is a great combo with Hangerback Walker. I just couldn't find all the space I wanted. I wanted 3 Pian Kirans and at least 3 Hangerback Walkers. I couldn't find all the space I wanted, and again, I wanted to play into the idea of having as few creatures as possible. That's the other reason I didn't play Abbot of Kyril Keep, another card that you could play, but I wanted to play as few creatures as possible so we could maximize our game against control, which the deck does do, because we just, again, blank a bunch of cards in their hand if they can't play removal. That said, I ended up with the 2 Structural Distortions because I think they're still good in competitive play. You know, Westvale Abbey shows up a lot in competitive play, and this card is fantastic against Abbey. With the Pyromancer's Goggles in play, you can bust 2 lands, which is actually really, really good, just to let you know. So, and deal 4 to them on top of the 2 lands you just busted up. So, all of that, very, very nice. I like Structural Distortion a lot. We're cutting it down to 3 copies of Goblin Dark Dwellers in this deck. And Goblin Dark Dwellers is still very important, but I don't want to play a bunch of 5-drops because we want to play Goggles as well. So I wanted to cut a copy of Dark Dwellers. Still works absolutely fantastically with everything up under the curve on it, except for Structural Distortion. It can't cast that. But Fiery Temper, Exquisite Firecraft, all of them, it can cast out of the graveyard. Like I've said a bunch of times already here, we're going to play 3 copies of Pyromancer's Goggles in the deck. Just makes the deck, and if you have the copies of Pyromancer's Goggles, or if you have the considerable amount of money it'll take to put 3 copies in the budget deck, definitely do that, because Pyromancer's Goggles is just crazy right now in this format. Just so many tricks that you can do with this. I've pretty much outlined most of them as I've gone through the cards here. But if you just copy like an Exquisite Firecraft, that's 8 damage. Yeah, it's just, it doesn't take a genius to figure out that this is good. We're also playing 2 copies of Chandra Flamecaller in this deck. She's great for a few reasons. There's a few tricks available to us here. Not only can she just close the game out by herself by putting tokens on the board, we are, burning out a lot of their creatures. We can keep the board clean and just win off of Chandra, dealing 6 damage a turn. That's not really that hard. Also, this is a free way to get the madness on Avacyn's Judgement. This is the cheapest way we can possibly cast a Judgement for a lot. So I like Chandra for that reason. We can also, this is cool, cast the Goblin Dark Dwellers on turn 5, play something out of our graveyard. Turn 6, we play a Chandra and burn the entire board for 4. We'll lose our Chandra, sure, but that'll also kill our Goblin Dark Dwellers. Next turn, we can play a Seasons Past and get both the Dark Dwellers and the Chandra back. At that point, we've wiped the board with Chandra, and we get to, recast another card with Goblin Dark Dwellers. So when we play the Chandra, we can just start making tokens and swing through. So it's just lots of good stuff with Chandra. I hope you caught all that, because there's a lot to talk about as far as Chandra. And to finish off the main deck here, 2 copies of Seasons Past. The only green card in the whole deck, and yeah, it costs 2 green, but don't worry. We get there very easily. That's not even really that much of a consideration, to be honest with you. Seasons Past provides 2 things in this burn deck here. It provides reach, which burn decks wants. Burn decks already have a fair amount of reach because we're just trying to do, to the dome, to the dome, to the dome, win. That's reach right there because we just draw cards, we get more turns. We can usually burn them out, but in this deck, Seasons Past really allows us to do a couple of things with our burn. It allows us to use our burn more liberally on creatures because we know we're going to be getting that burn back with our Seasons Past, so we can use it on creatures more. Or, conversely, against certain decks, it allows us to just go to the dome as much as possible, knowing that we can refill our hand with all of this premium burn and just deal twice the amount of damage we've already done over the course of the game. The other thing that it does, however, is that it provides combo support in a way. I've already talked about this, but with Avacyn's Judgement and Fall of the Titans, if we're holding either one of those in our hand, we can get back a 1-drop from our graveyard, if we don't have one in our hand, obviously, and set up a huge either one of those, Avacyn's Judgement or Fall of the Titans. If we have an Avacyn's Judgement and, say, a Lightning Axe in our graveyard, we can get both of them back with the Seasons Past and close the game out the next turn, usually. I know it seems super funky and really, really weird, but this is exactly what a burn deck wants. It wants to get all of the burn that it's played over the course of the game back, all in one fell swoop, and then usually in the game the very next turn, if you get a next turn. Sure, we have to tap out on turn 6, 7, 8 sometimes to play Seasons Past, but if we can get past that turn, we've got a bunch of damage just sitting in our hand ready to go. We're going to play 25 lands in the deck. You could go up to 26 with all these big drops, but 25 I'm okay with, especially considering we're playing Pyromancer's Goggles. That gives us a little bit of ramp. But in this deck, note that we're playing 14 green sources if you count the Evolving Wilds. If not, we're playing 10, which is still fine. That's plenty to get to 2 green, and we're still playing enough red sources to support all the red in the deck. We are still also playing 3 Drownyard Temple in the non-budget deck here. Good with Magmatic Insight, good with Tormenting Voice, any Madness Outlet, Lightning Axe for instance, so we can just get it back later. So definitely want to play Temple. And in some situations, it can be a form of ramp. You put it into play tap, and it doesn't count as your land drop for the turn, and you can do that, say at the end of your opponent's turn, if you don't have any better way of spending your mana. So, in a way, it can be ramp. And here's the sideboard for the competitive deck. It's actually not that much different from the budget deck. The big difference here is instead of Seismic Rupture, we get to play Kozilek's Return, which is just better. It deals damage to everything. That's pretty good. So, but if you don't have the money for that, because that's a pretty penny to play a playset of Return, you can still just play Seismic Rupture. And a lot of the time, that'll be okay. Sometimes it won't, but a lot of the time, that'll be okay. And here are your power rankings for the competitive deck. We get a lot of points adjusted in the competitive deck, up to a 68 final score, which is very, very competitive. And again, the deck is very good in a format full of planeswalkers and small creatures, especially post boards, because both decks play sweepers. And if you get off a sweeper that kills like 2 or 3 guys, you can feel a lot more comfortable focusing your burn on the player at that point. And you basically deprive them of 3 turns worth of resources if you can sweep. So after boards, we do especially well against aggro decks. And like I said, we still have good game against control decks because we're just going to the dome the entire time, And Exquisite Firecraft can really do a lot of work for us in the control matchup. And sometimes if we resolve a Goblin Dark Dwellers, that can be game if we have a Firecraft in our graveyard. If we resolve a Pyromancer's Goggles against control, it is definitely game. That said, this deck still has the problems that the budget deck has. Nissa's Renewal is a real bugaboo, and anything that gains life, things like Kalitas or Kalitas, I'm supposed to pronounce it correctly, I guess, Shambling Vent, there's a lot of stuff in the format, Sorin especially, but we can kill Sorin a lot of the time, although his starting loyalty is a problem even for this deck. So remember that. Anything that gains life is going to be an issue. You got to take care of it as quickly as possible. But for the most part, we tear through a lot of decks in this format, and I actually think this deck, especially the Seasons Past version, has legs. Let me know how you feel about the Seasons Past idea, because so far in the limited testing I've been able to do, it's been very impressive. But what of next time, young traveler? Well, I'm thinking about either doing Blue Ulamog next time, the Mono Blue Ulamog deck, or I'm going to do the Mono Green Triple Tech next time. Let me know also if you still want Grixis very soon, the competitive deck, or the Blue Red Madness budget deck. I've still got those on the docket. I've got them ready to go. I'm just trying to do all the monocolored stuff like sort of at the same time this week, because I love monocolored decks. I know you guys do too, and they keep the budget down. Obviously the Seasons Past deck isn't quite mono, but the budget deck is, so there you have that. Well, I gotta get out of here, Wizards. If you enjoyed the content, do me a solid. Don't forget to please like the video. Share it if you feel like it deserves being shared. Seasons Past burn is a crazy idea. Share that around. Comment. Let me know how you felt. Please talk to me about this one. And then sub if you're new, or if you just haven't gotten around to doing that because you're lazy like me. I'll see you next time. As always, I'm Dev from SBMTG, and as always, thanks for watching, my Wizards.